This conversation, we're going to be talking about a couple strategies on race day. In particular, I've got a few athletes at this time doing Ironman Florida, and a few questions have come up. And this video is to help kind of explain the approach that I recommend to athletes when they're approaching race day. And specifically, we're going to talk about hydration, nutrition, and pacing. They're all kind of intermixed in together because if you don't do the pacing right, it's going to be hard to stay up in your nutrition and hydration. And if you don't do that right, then you're not going to hit any pacing goals either because you're not going to have any energy. You're not going to have any fluids to help get you through. So we're going to go through these three specific topics, and specifically in that, my athlete kind of asked about these topics. So if you want to know more, you can always ask me and we can hit different topics for review and we can talk about that. But for now, this is what we'll talk about. So jumping on nutrition, because this plays into nutrition and hydration, plays into well before the race day starts. It starts basically during your training, but it plays into the week before as well, because if you're not eating properly and you're not hydrating properly the week before, the day before, it's going to affect race day. So you need to make sure that you are eating properly. You're not cutting calories because you're worried about putting on weight because it's tapered, you're not doing as much activities. You don't want to be worried about overeating because if you do that, you're going to have fat stores that add extra weight on race day that your body cannot process as efficiently as carb stores. And it's really kind of pointless leading up to the day before and the morning of. That's the kind of time to kind of get into the simple carbs and stuff that your body can easily digest, process, put as glycogen storage in your body and put in your liver. But the Monday, if your race is on a Saturday, overeating on that Monday is definitely not going to help you on Saturday. It's going to make you feel a little bit heavy, a little bit bloated in your body. If that's out of the ordinary, how you're typically eating, then it's going to affect you going into race day. You're going to feel slow and sluggish on race day. So we'll get into it, and that's one of the specific topics. So use nutrition, especially on race day, the same as you're doing in training. So if you're not using anything in training, that's not good. But if you're using Scratch, you're using UCAN, you're using Gatorade Endurance, whatever you're using, well, and that's more hydration, but whatever you're using, if you're using Cliff Bars, you're using base bars, you're using Field Bars from Better Nutrition, or whatever you're using in training is what you should be using on race day. Specifically, I'm kind of a fan of Pop-Tart Bites. They're convenient. They're not as crumbly if you use a regular Pop-Tart. I actually kind of crave them during a race. And they got plenty of sugar in there to easily use as digestible carbs. Probably not the best nutrition on race day, but I found for me personally it works because I also need something that makes me want to eat. After a while, too many Cliff Bars on the course, and I'm just sick of Cliff Bars and don't want to eat anything. So having something appealing is also important too. So whatever you're using in your training, make sure you use it on race day. Eat smart the week before, the day before. So I kind of mentioned that. Breakfast 2 hours before the start. So what I recommend for breakfast is what you've always done for breakfast. Don't go crazy. Don't go off the rails. Avoid too much fiber because that's going to be one of our key tips because you're going to be anxious anyway and you're going to spend a lot of time probably in the porta potty anyway. So the last thing you want to do is add fiber to it. And that breakfast too, if you normally drink coffee, then drink coffee like you normally would. Don't overdo it thinking that caffeine is really going to help you out because that's going to help with the fiber issue and that's going to be a disaster in the porta potty. You don't want that. But 2 hours before the race start, have your normal breakfast, normally what you would. Said kind of avoid the fiber if you can, simple carbs, toast with jelly or something like that, eggs and bacon, whatever. If that's your thing, if that's what you use, and normally you're good with that, that's what you eat the race day. But do it 2 hours before because that gives it time to kind of digest a little bit before you jump in the swim in your parallel and your body's not necessarily functioning as it normally would when you're standing upright. So getting it in 2 hours before is kind of key. So that's before you step in the water. So if your race started at 7 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and if you're not used to eating food at that time of the day, it's going to be a little difficult, but you need to get that food in and you need to get it starting the process because it's going to affect your whole day. So we did eat smart the day before. The later, and this kind of ties into the breakfast, making sure you're getting as much as you can early in the day as possible. And like I said, not overeating because you don't want to be bloated and too full. But later in the run, your hunger desire will go away. I guarantee it. Once you get to that 10-mile marker, it could be 8 miles for some, it could be 20 miles for others. You still have 6 miles to go, but that hunger, all the blood flow is going to other places, going to your muscles, going to your sweat. The last place it's really going to is your stomach, because it's shutting that down, because technically you don't need food to survive, but you do need glycogen, you do need the carbs in your body to produce energy to keep your muscles firing. But later in that run, you're not going to eat anything, and probably for the better, because you won't process it either. So what you do for breakfast and early in a bike ride makes a difference. The best time is first half of the bike. So once you get done with the swim, usually you can't, I've heard of some people trying to take stuff and put in their swim caps and stop halfway through the swim and eat it. I wouldn't recommend doing that. That's nothing I would try. If you're going to do that, more power to you. But that first half of the bike is the golden window to take in food and calories. So when you're riding through, make sure and I kind of put on here 400 to 500 calories an hour, especially that first half of the bike ride. Once you get to the second half, it may be hard to kind of shove that stuff in, and it may if you start feeling full and bloated and it's not processing, cut it off. Make sure you're drinking water with that to make sure you're helping the digestive process. So if you're not hydrated during that time, you're not going to be able to process that food. But that first half of the bike is really where you can eat your calories, because that's going to carry you on through the rest of the day. So you started to swim, breakfast before, and I forgot to put, 30 minutes before I do like a sports gel or a goo chop or something like that, about 100 calories or something, right, 30 minutes before the swim start. So you have a little bit of something on your stomach to process while you're doing the swim. But once you get out of that swim, it could be, if you're in swim time, it could be an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes, 2 hours, or whatever. You've gone that long without taking in anything, without fluids, without water, or fluids or nutrition. So getting food in your system, getting out there, and I'll go into the pacing, getting out there and starting your hydration and nutrition plan, and getting that 400 to 500 calories an hour is going to be important. So over that hour, it's not just you eat 400 or 500 calories at one time. You got to take parts of either Cliff Bars or whatever you're taking with you, or Pop-Tart bites, and every 15, 20 minutes, you're kind of taking little bites. Every 15, 20 minutes, you're sipping on your water to help wash it down in your sports drink. So it's over that hour. You're not just jamming it in and making your body work overtime. You're trying to process that all at once, but you're taking it in slowly. And that's why I kind of tell athletes, there's like, 112 miles on a bike, man, that's going to be so long, so boring. I don't know how I'm going to make it mentally. You make it mentally because you should be working through your nutrition, your hydration plan, and your pacing plan. So plan ahead if using your stuff, storage, T1, T2, special needs. So if you're bringing your own special stuff that they don't have on the course, you need to figure out how you're going to carry it on the bike. You're going to put it in your pockets in your tri-suit. You're going to have pockets on shorts. Do you have a storage bag on your bike? Do you have storage places on your bike? You're going to tape stuff to your bike. How are you going to keep it with you during the bike? And if you need more, there's a special needs stop. So you need to be able to get enough to get to special needs, and then special needs, you need to still be able to have a place to put your stuff that you're getting from special needs on your bike. And whatever you do, don't be in a hurry if you're going to stop at special needs, because so many stories of people blowing through, forgetting their stuff. They're just in a hurry and they're grabbing it and they throw it back, and then they get down the road and they realize, man, I forgot my hydration, my special hydration, I forgot nutrition, whatever. So T1, T2, are you going to have stuff, you have access to your bike the morning before, you're going to put it on your bike, and then just when you run out of T1, you're just going to have your suit and stuff, or you're going to have stuff in T1 in your bag, so when you put on your suit, you're stuffing it in your pockets too. So make sure you're thinking that through as far as when you're packing your T1, T2 bags, where are you going to put that nutrition, where are you going to store it to make it through, to get to your bike, to start the bike, and then, because you don't want to be in a frantic, where's all my stuff, forgot my stuff, I ran out of places to put it. Think this through before you actually start the race. When you're packing your transition bags, where's your stuff go? Does it fit on you, or are you going to have to stuff it down your tri-suit, or what are you going to have to do with it if you're not living off of stuff on the course? A lot of people forget about that. The other key here is if you are bringing your own stuff, try to, simple carbs. That's usually where the sports nutrition industry comes into play. Usually what they're putting out there is easily digestible, simple carbs. It's a lot of sugar, but that's what your body kind of needs, especially over long durations like that. So make sure whatever you're taking is not complex. Like I would avoid nut butters, peanut butter. I say that, but I'm talking out of the other side of my mouth. I crave peanut butter M&Ms, Reese's Pieces. So that actually helps keep me eating food. So it's kind of a catch-22. It keeps me eating, but at the same time, it's not exactly easy, digestible, and immediately useful to the energy stores. But I digress. So do as I say, not as I do. Hydration, we kind of touched on this as we're going along, but that's key, especially nutrition, to help you process this stuff. If you just eat food and you forget to drink, it's just going to sit in your gut and it's going to slowly digest because your body has to create all the fluids in your stomach to help process it through. So you need to make sure that you're drinking. And I say I aim for sipping every 15 minutes. So what's my target? How much am I supposed to be drinking? So in your training, there's opportunities, and there's still, Ironman Florida is still 2 weeks away. So when you go out and you do like an indoor treadmill run, or if you're going outside when it's warm, you weigh yourself before in the clothes you're going to weigh in after. You do the run. You discount anything you drank, and you try not to pee during or after until you weigh yourself. So then you go weigh yourself before and after, find the difference. That's how much fluid you use. Do it over a few workouts, runs separate from bikes, find the average, and that's kind of what you're going for, especially on the bike. I mean, you want to aim for 90% of that, because basically coming off the bike, you would be about 1 to 2% dehydrated. You do not want to be 5 to 6% of losing enough body mass because you're not going to make it up on the run unless you walk and you're sitting there drinking full cups of water or something. So that's what you should be aiming for, is about 90% of your sweat rate. So if it's 2 water bottles, if it's 24 ounces an hour, man, personally, what I went for in Chattanooga was one of the water bottles, so I could switch around my cage on my frame. So at every aid station, about 15 miles apart, 50 miles, I want to make sure I had at least one of those down. Probably should have drank a little bit more, but I think as far as hydration goes, I was pretty spot on. My nutrition, I think, was a little off personally. But like I said before, with hydration, the same thing with nutrition. You want to use the same as what you're using in training. So if you're using Gatorade Endurance, hey, great, it's on the course. If you're using Scratch or UCAN or something else, you mix it up, figure out where it's going to go. On your frames, do you have a hydration system on your frame? You're going to put more in special needs because you need to get it through there, or are you going to try to supplement, your special stuff with Gatorade Endurance and with water? Don't drink all sports drink. Make sure you're drinking pure water at some point, but you want to be careful. You don't want to overdrink. There's hyponatremia, where you actually dilute your blood so much that all the electrolytes, all the minerals and stuff, there's not enough concentration in your bloodstream to keep you function properly. So you need to be careful. What I say is, if you're thirsty, kind of late in the game, you need to start catching up. If you want to pee on the bike, or if you have to stop to pee, or if you're good enough to be able to pee on the bike, just make sure no one's behind you. Be considerate of others. Don't pee on people. But if you need to pee on the bike, you're in a good spot. If you need to stop at special needs, and if there's porta potties there, which usually are, hand to volunteer your bike, go over there and porta potty, get your stuff, put it on your bike, and get all ready to go. So that's going to be key. If you're not peeing on the bike, especially if you're out there for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, and you're not peeing within that time, you are dehydrated. So if you're not needing to pee on the bike, you are not hydrated. You need to catch up. And I'm saying, don't drink it all at once. Space it out every 15 minutes. Take a few good sips. Just make sure you get to the point that you need to pee, hopefully every 45 minutes on the bike. And that's going to be key, especially if you're doing a warmer race. You're going to have to take in more, especially if you're squirting it on your back to cool off. You need to be cognizant of how much you're drinking versus how much you're squirting all over yourself. So if you get to a certain point on the bike, if you get 2 to 3 hours in and you've only peed once, you need to step back and mentally think about where you're at with your hydration, especially if you're feeling dizzy, if you're feeling tired, worn out, or something like that. You need to make sure if you're eating right, you're drinking enough. If you're drinking enough, you're eating right. They lock in so much. See what else we got here. Every 15 minutes, drink early and often on the bike. I think I've hit that. Drink early in the run, won't do it later. So the hydration, it also kind of plays into when you get on the run, when you get in that second half of the run, like I said, your gut kind of shuts down. You don't want to do anything. You don't want to drink anything. You don't want to eat anything. You kind of have to force yourself to if you're in a bad situation. But hopefully you set yourself up well early in the bike, so when you get to that point, it's not as bad. It's going to be bad. You're going to experience it. You're probably going to be uncomfortable. But it's the difference between being bloated and your gut feeling bad and having to stop porta potties for problems versus maybe you walk every aid station, you're able to take a little bit of sips of water and Gatorade and stuff and kind of keep up and be able to run aid station. So it could be the difference between a 5-hour marathon and a 4-hour marathon, or a 6-hour marathon and a 5-hour marathon, is making sure you're eating when you can digest it. I'm not saying it's a smorgasbord, but make sure early in the race, and we'll kind of hit that in our pacing, that you're stopping at those early aid stations, hydrating decently, not overly, because you don't want to be sloshing. But you want to make sure that your pace kind of matches that, so your body's able to digest a little bit. But basically, once you hit the second half of the run, you're kind of at a point where your body's like, I've had enough. I'm not going to be processing anything else because you're using your muscles way too much, and we got to keep going because you won't let me stop. So I'm going to turn off the gut, and anything you put in there is going to sit there. So different things you could do. You can sip water. You can swish around your mouth and spit it out if you just get to the point where your stomach doesn't want to handle it. But if you've done all this properly on the bike, especially the first half, and tried as best you can on the second half, you've set yourself up well for the run, especially when you start. You can still do a few things. Take your time in T2. If you feel like you can eat something in T2 and you have it in your bag, do it then. Like I said, don't overeat, but drink some water. Make sure you've got a good consistency in there to get it through. So pacing plays into this. So if you're not pacing right, you're not going to be able to take in nutrition and hydration. If you go out there and just hammer the bike ride, you're going to forget about it, or it's going to be hard. It's not going to digest as quickly. Your body's not going to be as efficient. So when you're heading out to the bike, I always tell people, keep aiming for that zone 2, whether you're in power, heart rate, perceived rate of exertion. That first hour, it's pretty easy. You're not going out there, you're not hammering it. You're finding your sweet spot. You're starting your hydration, nutrition. You're staying on top of that. Because as you go along, you're naturally going to have to spend more energy and effort as your body starts wearing out, as you're using your muscles more. So zone 3, zone 4 for the rest of it. So I tell people the highest I like to see is zone 3. Once you start getting to zone 4 and you're really working hard, if you're trying to meet a pace that you want to achieve for the race or a time, you're going to start getting the zone 4 and stuff where you're going to burn yourself for the run. So cap it at zone 3. Even if you feel like you're feeling good and you can put out more, don't do it. Resist temptation, especially early in the bike, because 26.2 miles on the run, you have plenty of opportunity to spend that energy. Also, pacing, if you're uncomfortable on the bike, not just in your fit, but if you are getting sunburn out there, especially races like Florida, where you're going to be in kind of the open and it's sunny and maybe not as hot, but you're going to get sunburned. So make sure you get that sunscreen on your neck. If you don't have sleeves or anything, on your shoulders, on your arms, just make sure you're sunscreened up, because as you go on later, that will affect your pace and your effort. The goal is to be able to want to eat and drink, especially in that first half of the bike ride. You want to be able to eat and drink the entire bike ride, but specifically at that very beginning, because that's your time to catch up from the swim. That's your time to catch up before the second half of the bike ride, which really starts getting interesting, because that's where it's really going to play in. You know, did you hit all your key workouts? Did you do your long bike rides? Was there situations where something came up, you weren't able to get them done? So that pacing, especially on the bike, that beginning part will set up your race. So if you do it wrong, if you come out hot and heavy and you're after a certain time goal or pace goal, if you don't follow this whatsoever and you don't pay attention to your zones, heart rate, perceived rate of exertion, power, whatever you're doing, if you race out of there and forget everything and forget your transition or forget your sunscreen in T1, and you're just cruising along, you get 2 hours in your bike, you're like, man, I'm not eating anything. I'm starting to feel a little sluggish, and a little tired. I haven't peed for 2 hours. Man, that's because that's 4 hours if you haven't peed on the swim. So, and hydration is also important, because you want to keep sipping race morning too. I kind of forgot that whole point. You want to have something, either water, or I recommend sports drinks with some electrolytes in there. You know, Gatorade Endurance is always great. It's on the course, but have a bottle there when you arrive there. So after breakfast, 2 hours before the race, you've got, you know, a nice 24 ounces of Gatorade or whatever, and you're just sipping on it every couple minutes, 5 minutes, sipping on it. So that nervous energy, use it to sip on your drink. So you want to have that down and ready for the swim. So on the swim, you should have to pee in your wetsuit at some point. Everybody does it. You're out in the ocean. It's all part of nature. It's all good. Pee in your wetsuit. Just don't do it right as you're coming out of the water, so then you don't have a chance to rinse off. Just do it in the water. You'll be good. Nothing will come out. No sea creatures will come out and attack you or anything. So that all being said, you're setting yourself up to be able to eat and drink on the bike ride. So much of this plays into the run. If you don't pace the bike well, all this nutrition and hydration strategy just kind of goes out the window, because you're racing so hard, you're not going to efficiently process it. Same kind of goes for the run. At this point in time, kind of where you are on hydrate or on being hydrated or dehydrated. So if you're 5% coming off the bike, you're 5%, and you're not going to be any better for the day unless you're going to walk the entire marathon and drink lots of water, which it's still, depending on your race, it could be warm enough that you may not actually catch up doing it that way either. So just make sure that you've got everything right up to the run point. So those first 3 miles, holy cow, make them enjoy coming out of transition, soak it up, say hi to your family, give some hugs on the way out if they want to touch you because you're going to be gross, sweaty, and covered in sunscreen, hopefully. So that's the time to really take it easy, hit those first aid stations, walk them, get some hydration, get some nutrition, get some sports drinks. You know, if Ironman Chattanooga, they had ice socks. So if that's what you want to get, you know, load up on an ice sock, get everything that they possibly, check out what they have, especially if it's a loop course, you can come back, check out what they have, pre-plan what you're going to do. And if you think you're going to use it, you know, grab it and have it, you know, get rid of the trash cans or save it to the next aid station. Really absorb the aid stations and take your time, manage that energy in the first couple miles, because everybody wants to gun it out of there and they want to just trot down the line. I guarantee you the pace you start that marathon with will not be the pace you end it with. It will be a lot slower one way or another, or it could be walking. But you have 26.2 miles to make it up. If you feel great at the end, hey man, knock it out, sprint it to the finish line, last few miles are the fastest miles. I'd rather see negative splits personally. So keep that zone 2. I hate to see zone 3 on the run. You'll probably end up getting there a few times, but keep that low zone. And like I said, you know, make a deal with yourself if it's running aid station. So every aid station, you walk it to get that heart rate down, because you will pay for it as you go along if you do not get that heart rate in check. Zone 3, and you're like, I'm going to push it. I don't care what it says. I'm going to tough it out. I'm going to make my body do it. You get to zone 4, and then eventually you're going to be going very slow, and you're going to be in zone 5 because your body is just done and you didn't pace yourself well. So like I said, hit the aid stations early, hit the water, hit the nutrition. So like I said, the goal is, I mean, coming out of transition, it's almost, you want to, I wouldn't say walk the first mile, but man, just a very light jog just to get your legs underneath you, get used to being off that bike. First 2 or 3 miles, really soak up the aid stations. Then maybe at that third aid station, it's like, all right, I'm going to put a little bit more mustard on it. So aid station, I'm going to put a little bit more. So once you get to that 8 mile, 10 mile mark, you're like, I'm feeling good. You know, maybe it's an opportunity to run through a few aid stations, you know, and just get the water and, you know, sip it while you're running or jogging or something like that. But if you're not feeling it, that's the time to kind of pay attention to your body. If you're starting to feel fuzzy, lightheaded, you need hydration, have you peed in a while? Or do you need nutrition? Are you just feeling low? If you need nutrition, more than likely you're going to have to walk to make sure that you can get it processed. Do you need a little bit of energy? You know, is this the time? Have you tried Red Bull? Like I said, I'm in Chattanooga. That was kind of my lifesaver towards the end of the run. Nice, cold, wet Red Bull and a cup of ice. It was a game changer. It helped get energy because at that point I was not doing solids. There was no way I was going to do solids because they were going to come right back up. Not to be gross, but that's just going to be the way it is. It's the second half of the run, especially. So train with what you're going to use. If you want to use Red Bull, if you want to use flat Coke, you still got time to test them out in your runs. So if you're doing a long run, a long bike ride or brickwork or something like that, test it out. You know, take that, you know, put some flat Coke out for you and do some loops around your house and just kind of sip it, see how you do running with it. If you don't do well in training, then don't do it on race day. I never thought I'd say this, but I do like Red Bull because it was not as carbonated. It kind of had a nice sweet taste, especially when it was cold. If it was warm, I don't think it would work. But toward the end of that run, you're going to be kind of looking for anything to get to that finish line, especially if you're getting to a point where you're lightheaded, you're fuzzy, you're cramping up. You know, you need to stop and assess where you're at. Have you peed in a while? Are you hydrated? Are you covered in salt? Do you need nutrition? Do you need base salts? What do you need? And hopefully you've been working on stuff as you've been doing your long rides and runs to kind of tell you what is going to work best. The last resort is trying different things on the course you've never tried. And there may be a certain point at mile 20 that you're kind of looking for anything. You know, they bust out the chicken broth, but you've never had it. Personally, I never had it, and I did it my first Ironman at Lake Tahoe when it got dark. It was in the 40s, and they had warm chicken broth, and actually it gave me enough to get that last 8 mile loop done and come back into the finish line. So that it all just plays together. Nutrition, hydration, pacing. If pacing's off, you can't do the hydration, nutrition exactly the best way possible. If you don't do nutrition or hydration right, even though you pace yourself on the bike, you're going to pay for it in the run because you're going to be undernourished, underplenished. There's nothing you can do the week leading into it other than eating the same, eating healthy. Don't overdo it, don't underdo it. And leading into race day and being topped off, don't go crazy the night before eating some big old carb loaded dinner. Eat normal. Race day, have your breakfast 2 hours before, and then your job for the day is eating and drinking, eating and drinking, eating and drinking, pacing yourself, eating, drinking, pacing, eating, drinking, pacing. Don't pay attention to anybody else. Don't pay attention to your times. Don't pay attention to your pace. Do what you need to get to the finish line to where you're not dragging ass across that line and you feel horrible and wretched, especially at mile 20. You don't want that feeling. I've been there plenty of times and you don't want to do it. So these are my tips. These are my ideas for my recommendations for race day strategy, specifically hydration, nutrition, and pacing. Kind of targets. So if you want to pause the video and you can kind of see what I'm talking about as far as how many calories an hour here. Nutrition, this 400 to 500 calories, that's usually on the bike. On the run, I'm looking at 200 to 300. 300 is going to be the high end. Especially this is going to be the first half. The second half is going to be hard. And do count sports drinks, counts towards that. So if you're able to switch over to sports drinks, you know, you're going Gatorade, endurance on the course or something like that, that works. So just be aware, 400, 500 calories an hour on the bike, especially the first half. The second, the next portion of the run, you know, the first couple miles, 200, 300 calories. I would probably, especially if it's warm, be on the lower side because after a while, like I said, your gut's going to kind of stop working as well. And you just don't want that stuff sitting there and making it very uncomfortable to do anything later other than walking. Because I'm not going to say that's a cardinal sin. I've done plenty of it myself. But you're not going to get done in a quick fashion if you're walking 26.2 miles, 10 miles, whatever. You don't want to be at a point. You want to be at a point that you can at least jog from aid station to aid station and get there and get done and not get too far deep in the hole. Again, race day strategies. You got any questions? Hit me back in emails, messages, whatever you got, and I'll get back to you.